As software developers, we are obsessed with optimizing code, building flawless systems. But what if I told you that most problems in our software don't start in the code, but in our brain? That's why today I'm going to unpack 10 lessons that I took out of this book by Hans Rosling. That is a book that is nothing about code, but yet I believe that there's a lot of things there that can make us a better developer. This is not about code, syntax, or algorithms. This is about rewiring the way that we think, the way that we approach problems. It's about changing our assumptions. And it will impact you not only in your IDE, but also out of it. So let's do it. But first, just a bit of context. The book is this one right here. This is the Portuguese version, but the title is the same. We also use the English title as well. And why did I read this book? And it was mostly because I saw it was one of the books that in a given year, I don't recall which year, Bill Gates said it was one of the best books he read on that year. And then I saw a lot of reviews and I saw that even Barack Obama was recommending it. And it looked like a really cool book. Not a book about code, but a book how we should think the world. And I got interested into it, so I grabbed a copy of it. And I was quite impressed while reading the book. When I'm picking a book to read that is about code or software design, testing, whatever, I confess that sometimes I start reading the book already thinking if there's something here that I can convert into a video like this. This one I was not expecting, but while I was reading, there was a lot of things coming to my mind saying, yeah, we have this type of problem in software development. We suffer with this thing a lot. Okay, maybe there's something here that we can change. And I tried to summarize 10 big lessons that I took out of the book, and is those that we'll see now. The first one is challenge your assumptions and biases. One of the lessons that I took out of the book is that sometimes we are so inclined into a given perspective that we assume that is the only truth that exists in the world, the only way to read the data. And the book will challenge you to start looking into problems from different perspectives, to trying to expand the scope, to see the data after the one that you have. So it's kind of like stepping back and seeing even more data and more angles to address a given problem. And we developers, we tend to have strong convictions. We will say things like, this should be done this way, this is the best practice, users will never do that. And we create those narratives, those stories, those ideas, without having something that will sustain those opinions, those decisions. And in the book, there's a set of things that you believe in the world that the author will show you that sometimes they are not true, and that you need to use data to confirm the assumptions, to dig deeper and understand the reality. So in our case, when we have assumptions like that, we need to put them in practice. We need to see them through code. We need to see them through data. We need to see them through testing without having an assumption, without saying something that is factual, that is factfulness, that will prove that your assumption is correct. The second one is embracing data-driven decisions. The book is a lot about data. Okay, you'll see a lot of charts, you will see a lot of diagrams, you will see a lot of ways to classify the data that you collect from serves. And all of that made me think about the way that we do things. I often feel that we operate software based on gut feelings, based on this looks that it's okay, this looks like that it is fast, this looks like that there's no problems with this part of code. So it's always a gut feeling. Or sometimes you might have that opposite feeling, like this looks a mess, so this thing will create a lot of problems, without looking into data that will prove that. There's one sentence on the book that I really like, that is, the world cannot be understood without numbers, but the world cannot be understood with numbers alone. So it's not that by saying that we need to have data-driven decisions, that we should only take decisions based on the numbers. Otherwise, I've seen that happening, that we spend so much time looking for numbers and trying to come up to the conclusion that sometimes make every single thing go slower. They don't bring a lot of value. Often we'll go into that data exploration just to confirm our gut feeling. And sometimes the gut feeling can be quite useful. The thing is, metrics, profiling, those type of things, or telemetry data, all those things can be quite helpful to understand if we are taking the correct decision or if it's just a feeling. So you should use your gut feeling. Sometimes the way that you read between the lines is more than enough, but data can either prove you wrong or it can sustain the thing that you are doing. The third one is that complexity is your friend when handled right. This is hard to say to me when I'm always preaching simplicity. I get it. But the way that I understood the book is that the world is complex. There's a lot of issues going on. There's a lot of things that are sensitive. There's a lot of things that it's hard to say that it's black or white, okay, that there's only two options, that is binary, or it's always this way. Things are complex, in fact. And when we try to find simple solutions for complex problems, we are taking the risk of oversimplifying things. We'll get into a point where eventually we are labeling something as simplifying when in fact it's just a quick hack. And quick hacks can be dangerous. We know that. So when we are talking about code, and we as developers, we need to be aware of this. We need to be aware that sometimes in fact the problem is complex. And we can apply simplicity to the complex problems, the simplicity ideas. But that means building solutions that can be decomposed. That means building solutions that can be scalable, applied in different ways. That means finding the correct abstractions. That doesn't mean looking to a complex problem and just to apply the label of simplicity, we apply a dirty hack. And that is the sensitive thing that we need to use when we are writing code, when we are building systems, is to understand that when something looks complex, eventually in fact is a complex problem and can be handled with a simple solution. And when I say that, it means that you can still build something simple in a simple way, but be aware that sometimes the simplest thing that looks like you can do might be a hack that will not survive in the future. The number 4 is stay humble and keep learning. Let me read you a sentence that I think will land perfectly into the development world. It is quite relaxing being humble because it means you can stop feeling pressured to have a view about everything. How many developers don't we know that they feel the need to have a view on anything? You are discussing a problem, they are specialists. The world is moving to AI, everyone knows about AI. You criticize something, they go even on top of it. If you point something on their code, just asking a question, they get too defensive. And the reality is that when we approach the world in a different way, assuming that we don't know everything, we are not specialists on everything, that will be so much more pleasant, not only for you, but also for the others that are working with you. Because now you are opening to the opportunity to learn something new. You are not getting defensive. This is not us against them. And that is awesome. But also this idea of opening the world as an opportunity to learn new things, to explore different things, to understand that others can influence you, can help you to grow. So it's not only about that growth mindset of just bringing new knowledge, it's the growth mindset in the sense of acknowledging and being mindful of the things that you don't know and opening the space to acquire new knowledge. The number 5 is avoid the rush. When we feel the pressure to do something quickly, the risk of doing the wrong thing is quite high. On the book, it talks about some stories, and I don't want to be extremely explicit. I don't want to have spoilers. But It talks about the story when something happened. It's important to control it quickly. So it talks with the politicians that were managing a given region of a country, and they take a quick decision to trying to control something. And that quick decision eventually backfires and creates another problem. And the thing is, sometimes you take those quick decisions, those quick fixes, in order to control something. But often there's a risk of creating something, a problem even bigger. Okay. And the important lesson here is there's things that are urgent and important, and you need to react quite quickly, like our site is down because of this bug. We need a quick fix right away. Let's do it. Other thing is when you take something that looks like urgent, but in fact is not, and you rush through it, and eventually you might take a decision that in the long term will be the worst decision that you can have. For example, you have a deadline, so you quickly adopt a given technology because it's the one that you use, but maybe you didn't collect enough data to sustain that decision. So likely in 3 months, you will be regretting that decision because it was not the correct decision. You didn't have enough data. It's hard to take these decisions. It's hard to understand everything without going deep into everything. But it's important to understand when we need to go really fast, get in, get out, keep everything working. From those moments when we can take just a bit more time to question the assumptions, to understand if there's something that in fact needs to be done quickly, and trying to do it without creating a bigger problem. The number 6 is focus on progress, not perfection. This is a hard one. Why? I know we should strive for quality, and for some reason in this area there's a lot of perfectionists. That is true. But when we are so locked into the perfect thing, we think that by building the perfect thing is the only way to improve. Eventually we don't improve. It's quite different than keep a consistent pace of small improvements, keep progressing, and eventually, by the end, it will not be clear because you need to step outside to see how much did we improve during that time. So on the book, it talks about the world, okay? So in the day-to-day, we have the feeling that the world is getting worse, okay? We feel that there's more insecurity. We feel that there's a lot of problems with health issues. We feel that there's a lot of poverty. We feel all those things. And when we look into specific cases that we see on the news, that is true. But once we step out and we can see the world through a span of, imagine, 100 years, we can clearly identify that the world is progressing. Okay, the world is getting better. Obviously, if we don't step outside, we'll not have that feeling. And the same thing happens in our day-to-day. If we just focus on actions that will have a payout right now without trying to come up with a consistent way of improving things, it will not work. Can give you an example. As you know, I love testing, and I suffered a lot with software without tests in place, with a lot of quality issues in the past. And all the fixes that we tried to apply that were kind of like a one-time thing, like let's stop a few months, do a major refactoring, bring tests in place, and everything will be fixed after. Those things didn't work. Once we changed the approach to more like a cultural thing of keep improving, so each day we try to improve something. When we step out, we can see that the end result was better than stopping a few months trying to improve everything. That's exactly the same idea. The number 7 is see the big picture. As developers, it's quite natural that we'll be obsessed with the code that we are working on. It's quite easy to pick a task. We have an idea on how to do it. We start typing and we get obsessed to that. We get locked into that experience of the IDE, getting into flow, typing the code. But eventually that can become a problem. If we don't step back to see the whole picture, we might be building the wrong thing or building the correct thing in an inefficient way because we are not seeing what is happening outside. And this means that it's not only about getting outside of that building block and seeing the software as a whole. It means sometimes getting outside and seeing the multiple parts of the software, even the components that you interact with, to understand the things as a whole. But it's not only a question of acquiring that knowledge. Okay, so at first stepping back, seeing the big picture, and now I know everything, I can go deeper. It's having this constant vision of how things are from the outside. Because software changes extremely fast. And when we are building big systems, eventually different teams are building different things. So the image that we have built about that system is changing quite fast as well. So every single thing is transforming. That's why it's important to frequently stepping back from the things that we know, observing what is around, and reevaluating our decisions. Is the idea of see the forest, not the trees. The lesson number 8 is don't fear the change, manage the risk. Nowadays in the world, we can see that there's a lot of fear based on a lot of things that are happening. The world is crazy right now, so we know that. But one thing that we can know from history is that we often tend to take some decisions in a rush based on fear. And when we use fear to guide decisions, we leave facts apart. This is basically fear-driven thinking, let's say. So you drive all your decisions due to fear. In software, the same thing happens quite often. When you are in a rush, when you are facing a lot of problems, when you need to adopt a new technology that you are not familiar with, when you need to touch legacy code, when you need to do a major refactoring, all of those things can build fear. The question is, how can we fight that fear-driven thinking in software? And that can be done by having facts that will prove that we are safe. Basically, facts that will contradict the fear that you have. So in software, that can be things like having a CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous delivery. That might be having a proper strategy in place, having a safety net built by automated testing. Because once you have that safety net in place, they will help you to minimize that feel of fear when you are going through the change of innovation. That is something that should happen quite frequently in our space. The lesson number 9 is about improving your communication skills. The book talks a lot about explaining things to others, basically through numbers, through facts. And this is something that we developers, we tend to have this problem when we need to explain something to others, especially to those that don't understand our language. For example, talking with someone that is not a developer, or arguing with someone that is just starting the career and we have been doing this for 10 or 20 years. There's this gap is something that is hard to fight. So in the book, it says something like that the world can't be understood without numbers, something like that. So you need numbers to understand how things are going in the world. And in our case, I think that code or software can't be understood without clear code that is readable, that is simple. Our software can't be understood without diagrams. Our software can't be understood without simplifying complex ideas into simple terms. So this is about improving communication. It's something that is quite often one of the things that we know that as developers we need to improve. And this book will give you a way to understand how that can be done through numbers, through diagrams, and understand how sometimes those numbers and those diagrams can be misleading. And eventually, if you change your approach, you can explain things better. Number 10 and final one is be optimistic, but realistic. We often have two different types of approaches in the world. Like we have the optimists and we have the pessimists, right? And from my experience, depending on the company where you work and sometimes depending on your personality, you might be inclined to be on one of those two spots. And for example, there are some cultures where being optimistic, being a daydreamer, being someone that is always assuming that every single thing will go right, is a good idea. And that is quite cool and is a positive trait that a developer in theory should have, because we love to build stuff. We believe that all the problems can be solved through code, and if you give us enough time, we will be excited about that, and we'll try to find a solution, and eventually we will find it. But is that pleasure of solving problems, that excitement that comes when we have a new challenge, that sometimes puts things at risk, that creates the risk of starting something with that huge expectation that we will achieve something, and we don't think about the other side. We don't think about the business side. We don't think about how viable something is. We don't think about deadlines, costs, and feasibility, all because we are so excited about the opportunity, the challenge. So what we have here is, in one side, you have your optimist side, but also we need to balance that with a bit of realism, okay? We need to step out of that optimist mindset sometimes and balance that against the realism. Why? Because companies need that so they can pay you, right? I went through several projects when things went wrong because of that mindset. We believed that we could do anything. The problem is that we always forgot to put that against reality. And eventually the reality will come and it will destroy our hopes and dreams. So in the book, it talks about working on an hospital in a poor country and having that feeling that he needs to save every single person that comes there. And at a given point, he understands that there's options there. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't save every single person that comes because you need to save a bigger number of people. Okay, so some decisions need to be made to the greater good. And while it's good to be an optimist and believe that every single thing will be better and believe that we can fix all the problems, sometimes we need a bit of realism to understand where we can apply that optimist mindset in an effective way in order to, in fact, produce change. Those are the 10 lessons that I took out of the book. And in my opinion, is a book that is quite easy to read. Okay, I recommend it. So if I have to give it a rating from 1 to 5, I would say it's a solid 4. And I think that even not being a software development book, there's a lot of great lessons here for us. Not only for when we are writing code, when we are thinking about systems, but also when we think about the world that we live in. If you like this one, you will want to watch this video right here, where I will share with you all about the book by Kent Beck, the most recent book, that is Tidy First, a book that is all about improving your source code.